Hey PCWorld fans, Battlefield 6 is out today, which means it's time once more to dig in and find out why micro stutter mega matters. I'm looking at Battlefield both in single player and multiplayer. And as you know, DICE has a long history of making really smooth playing multiplayer games. This is the first single player campaign they've had in a hot minute, and I'm excited to see how it performs as well. We're going to get into it. I have data from the single player campaign with the release drivers that came out a couple weeks ago from NVIDIA. I have some beta multiplayer experiences from a couple weeks ago when they had the big open beta. And I'm testing this on a 9950 X3D with a 5090, so it's the best possible case. Obviously, your mileage may vary a little bit depending on the hardware you have. So that's it. That's what you're going to see. We're going to pop up the graphs in just a second, but first I have to thank EA and NVIDIA for sending us the code and early access to the game so we could test this out and have it available on launch day. Without further ado, let's jump straight into the frame times. So this is a classic landing craft sequence from Battlefield. We haven't seen one of these in a long time in a game, and it performs really well. If you haven't watched one of my MicroStutter videos before, what you're seeing on the graph that's overlaid on top of the video is actually the frame time render times for each frame that you're seeing in the game. It's about a 60-second clip. It's running at well, you're seeing 60 frames a second. This is a good way to illustrate whether the game feels stuttery when the video is going to always be better than 60 frames a second. So this is a situation where lower and better, neither is particularly better or worse than the other. What you want is the frames to be tightly packed, because big variance between frames is what makes games feel micro-stuttering. And you're about to see a big spike up here when this smoke hits. All I can say is that the single player smoke is very fancy and presumably pretty expensive to compute. There it is. There's the spike. Look at that. Oh, wow, that's a big one. So I'm less concerned about performance in on-rails sections or story sections where they take control of the camera, and much more in tight action, high action sequences like this one. This is an approach mission. There's a bazillion enemies on the screen. There's a lot of shooting. There's a lot of explosions. There's a lot of fire and smoke. And as you can see, the pattern is really tight. There's spikes here and there, but they're consistent from frame to frame in the same region. And when I was playing this, it felt fantastic. It felt super smooth, similar to an id Engine game, Doom, something like that, or playing a really old game that has really good performance.
Reloading! Keep him off me!
We're never going to let up. So this is another clip with some action. You're going to see a couple big spikes here. They mostly pop when the smoke goes, but again, they bring the variation from frame to frame, goes up gradually and comes back down slowly. So you don't actually feel it when you're playing the game, even though the spikes do indicate that there's higher and lower frame times. And this is a little bit more complicated area. You'll see this is, around 8 milliseconds is the average frame time, it seems like. Please don't judge my shooting. Okay, you can judge that shooting.
Clear. Keep that armor moving. Copy.
Okay, the smoke's coming up here in a second. Boom, frame spikes. Big spikes here. A lot of action, a lot of smoke. But again, it didn't feel bad because the frame time variation from frame to frame is relatively similar. Now this next one shows the difference in nighttime and daytime, and I thought this was interesting because the frame times are higher here. We're in a city environment. There's a lot of geometry. There's a lot of light. There's a limited number of light sources, but a lot of dynamic lights in this area. And we also are switching to some post-processing effects like the night vision goggles. But as you can see when you're playing, also, this is not how you break a lock. I don't even know what they're doing there. But this sequence, look at how tight this pattern is here. We're looking at relatively small areas, and we're in tight tunnels fighting. This felt really good, and it looks quite nice as well.
All this disorder. We sure the asset's gonna be in one piece when we get there?
12-foot palace walls are a pretty good deterrent. Packs above, hold your fire.
A lot of polygons in a 12-foot wall.
Salim's playing a dangerous game.
All the public knows is
So that was it for the single player portion. I think I gotta say the performance is quite good. It looks really pretty. This isn't a game that has a bunch of bells and whistles. It supports DLSS. It supports frame gen. I didn't actually turn frame gen on, but I did use DLSS in my tests for this. It was upsampling from the quality setting. And I didn't use frame gen in the multiplayer either for obvious reasons. It adds a little bit of latency, and you don't want that in a multiplayer game. There's no ray tracing or anything like that in this. This is just good old-fashioned raster pixels, just generated in a really nice looking way. So for multiplayer, the big difference is that I tested at 1080p, partly because my 4K monitor was on the fritz, partly because I think people are more likely to play a kind of competitive game like Battlefield at a lower resolution than 4K. So this clip shows the impact of an occasional transient frame. You'll notice some big spikes, but it's just a single frame here and there, and those actually don't feel as bad either as the ramp up and ramp down. Like the hard ramps and hard swings are much worse. My teammate is not picking me up here. Menu spike.
We need attack support on the marked objective.
Not sure what that spike was. It might have been a shader loading or something like that. Okay, this one, there's not a lot of enemies at the beginning, and then there's a ton of enemies at the end, and you'll note that the frame times stay pretty consistent all the way through, which is a real key to making this feel good. Like I said earlier, the variations, the big spikes and dips are when you start feeling like you have a ton of micro stutter. As long as your frame times are consistent, that really matters a lot more than the high highs and the low lows. This is why I like frame times better than average frame rate for how games feel versus raw measure of performance. I haven't talked to anybody about this, but I wonder if it would be worth adding extra frames in, or skipping frames to maintain that even frame feel. This one shows that the multiplayer smoke doesn't seem to be as expensive as the single player smoke. And I don't know if this is a beta change or a settings change. All of my settings were on auto for both of these runs. I did set the frame rate, the target frame rates, rather than letting it dynamically change settings to get the frame rates. But yeah, this is pretty much what you want. Like, the smoke's out, it's doing its thing, it's obstructing vision, but the frame times aren't varying widely like they did in the single player mode. Big menu spike there as well. But who cares? You're in the menu. You don't need low latency in a menu. Oh, they got me. So, as a reminder, this was all recording to the beta. The performance can vary based on server performance and stuff like that. I also wasn't good at using the paddles at this point in the game. But this is interesting because you can see there's a little more variation during the beta, which may have been because they had some debug hooks still turned on in the game, rather than that were turned off for the shipping game. But it still felt really smooth, and most of the latency issues that I was seeing were server latency or lag, not rendering lag. Those are bad guys. Oh, this one's interesting because when that menu pops up, you see that big frame spike. And then there's variations in the latency based on the menus you're in. I think the the map menu has high latency because of that preview window in the lower right corner. But ultimately, menu latency doesn't matter. So that's Battlefield 6. I think DICE has once again showed that they have the chops to keep your performance good in a multiplayer game and a single player game. I enjoyed my time with this. I want to spend some more time with multiplayer when there's more players on the servers. Frankly, right now it's a little thin because it's all pre-release. And I'm really stoked that DICE still has it when it comes to performance. You know, it's been a while since we've seen a single player game from them, and this is exciting. I gotta say, thanks to NVIDIA and EA for providing early access to the game. And we'll have more MicroStutter videos soon. I've got something in the hopper for a game that maybe is not performing quite as well as this. And we're definitely gonna look at some lower end hardware, so it's not all just 5090s. And you know what? You gotta love that Battlefield still lets you zap your enemies with the thing that's supposed to bring your friends back to life. Look at that guy get it. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.